And I think the influence of the railways is almost akin to the birth of the internet in the digital age. It's been so significant in terms of its impact and influence.
Welcome to Calling All Stations, the transport podcast. I'm Christian Walmer, an author and journalist who has covered transport for the past 30 years. In every episode, we try to keep you up to date with the most engaging news stories, policy developments, and interviews in the transport world. And with me is my regular co-presenter, Mark Walker, who has spent decades looking at transport policies and legislation. So, Mark, what are we covering today?
Hello, Christian, and Happy New Year to you and to all of our listeners. We have two main items in the podcast today. A little later, we're going to discuss developments relating to buses in Great Britain and the introduction of a major new piece of legislation to reform the bus services and industry. But before that, we have an interview with Alan Hyde, who's been speaking to you about the Railway 200 initiative, celebrating the bicentenary of the Stockton and Darlington Railway throughout 2025.
Well, it's 200 years in 2025 since the opening of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, which is a pioneering railway in several respects in terms of taking passengers and using steam engines. And the celebrations are going to go on all year and organised by the Rail 200 committee. And we thought that to kick off the new year, we would have a chat with Alan Hyde of Rail 200 to tell us both about, what's going on, but also let's start off, Alan, with why is this important? Why should we care about, 200 years of an old ramshackle railway?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that description, but thanks very much for having me on, Christian. No, I think, the railways is hugely important to our national life. It's shaped the way we live, shaped our livelihoods, it shaped the world. And as you know, that moment in 1825 with the Stockton Darlington Railway was the journey that's changed the world. It was a pivotal time. So I think it's right to celebrate what's a national milestone for an industry that really matters to people and the economy and the environment. And I think, the railway itself provides lots of benefits, perhaps some of which don't get sort of fully recognised. It's had a very rich pioneering pedigree, which is still alive and kicking today, shaping the modern age. And I think it's right and proper that we take time out to celebrate its achievements and look forward to a simpler, greener, better railway.
What do you think? What do you think are the achievements that we should really look at then, or you're going to celebrate?
Well, I think Railway 200, which we're a very small core national team, but it's a partner-led campaign, as you know. So we've been doing a phenomenal amount of engagements last year, which is all about preparation and engagement. This year's all about delivery, and it's trying to tell a very big story, potentially the UK's biggest ever rail story, with support from our partners, about how the railway's role in national life, that it obviously carries large numbers of people around the country to jobs and to the market. It carries large numbers of goods that help us to enjoy a certain quality of life through freight services. It's environmentally friendly. It takes lorries off the road, considerably less CO2 than travelling by car. It's created, mass tourism. There's lots of things that the railways, as you well know, Christian, with your background, has done to shape the 21st century. And I think the influence of the railways is almost akin to the birth of the internet in the digital age. It's been so significant in terms of its impact and influence. As I say, it's created mass tourism, it's created towns and cities. Bournemouth and Blackpool wouldn't be the coastal resorts they are without the railways. Towns like Crewe and Doncaster and Swindon wouldn't be what they are today without the railways. And it shrunk the economic geography of the country and the world by carrying large numbers of people efficiently and lots of cargo of long distances. It's also clearly done other things like creating standardized time. Previously clocks were
All right,
set differently
Greenwich,
in different
yes.
places. So, that's something that perhaps is sort of taken for granted. The railways created the mail order business, the home deliveries. A place in Newtown in Powys in Wales was the origins of what's now a multi-billion pound global business. You think of all the couriers that were knocking on your door, no doubt at Christmas, laden with presents. That industry started in the railways.
Oh,
It's
I didn't
contributed.
realize that. That's something you've told me just now. Right,
It's all on our time, but we have a fantastic timeline that the
right.
National Rail Museum helped us to curate on our website. So I'm delighted to have sort of taught you something there, Christian. But there's lots of other things as well. It shaped our cultural life. Obviously, over the ages, it's inspired artists, musicians, filmmakers down the ages, and continues to be a source of inspiration. You just have to think of Harry Potter and the Hogwarts Express, for example. It's actually, contributed to our sporting life, our health and well-being. Man United, as you well know, was formed at Newton Heath, Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway in 1878. So we were hoping that we can hook up with them this year and celebrate their origins as a global
Not
brand.
sure that's a
Uh,
good idea given how badly they're doing, but no, I wish them luck.
well, there is that. Well, perhaps I'm not sure where Crewe Alexandra is. I think their nickname is the Railwayman. So
They're in
that
Division Two, but
and there's clubs abroad, as you well know. I think there's a football club in South America that sports the colours of the original Stockton and Darlington Railway.
oh, I didn't
Uh,
know that either.
so lots of interesting facts and contributions. I think the railway has made to our rich tapestry of life. I think also by is created countries. The US, India, they wouldn't be the countries they are today without the railways. And by connecting communities and improving people's livelihoods, but certainly through the connectivity, it's actually given people a sense of their own national identity. Obviously, before the railways, they wouldn't have travelled as far. And it's the railways that actually created, they started to understand the physical and economic and social geography of their nations. So it's been really important in forging that sense of national and regional identity. So a whole plethora of ways in which the railway has, I think, influenced um, uh, our individual lives, but also national and community life. And I think that deserves some celebrating. Obviously, there's plenty of things in the railway to fix at the moment in today's railway. The railway recognises that and is going through a transition as it moves towards Great British Railways. But I think the Railway 200 story, I hope, will be kind of a bridging narrative to the Brave New World when that's created more fully. And to try and tell that very big story, we're focusing on really four key themes, one of which is education and skills, because part of our remit is to try and encourage more people from all backgrounds to join the railway. As you know, there's a skills gap at the moment due to
Yeah.
widen as more people, experienced people retire in the coming years. The railway isn't as diverse as it should be in terms of workforce. It's only about 16% of people in the railways, a big industry of 250,000 people, but only about 16% are women. So there's a big gender imbalance. We need to get more people from ethnic minorities and also more people with cognitive issues, because the railway should be provide opportunities for all, and I think that's what it wants to achieve. So that's part of our remit in the time we've got as an anniversary campaign to supplement the industry's efforts to bring things together and to try and promote not just a diversity of role, but a diversity of people joining the industry. We have a
Okay.
number of events and activities which I can come on to
Well,
talk about.
what's the other three? You said there's four kind of things you're doing. What's the other
Yeah,
three?
well, educational skills is hugely
Yeah.
important for reasons I've mentioned. There's also innovation, technology, and the environment, so the whole
So that's looking
sustainability
forward
agenda.
rather than backwards.
It is
Yeah.
because, importantly, Railway 200 is not just a sort of sepia lens retrospective through rose-tinted glasses and saying, weren't we wonderful?
Yeah.
It's about past, present, and future, and that's very, very important part of our remit. Obviously, there's a lot of rich heritage to talk about, but I think in the story we want to tell is around how our pioneering pedigree in the past as is alive and kicking and shaping the modern age, and we continue to innovate with technology, moving towards net zero, environmentally friendly way of traveling, getting lorries off the road, as I've mentioned.
Right.
So all of that is the second theme, and then there's heritage, culture, and tourism. So I've talked about culture in terms of inspiring and influencing our cultural landscape, as it were. We do hope that through all the events and activities that are taking place this year, we've been working very closely with Visit Britain, is to encourage more inbound tourists who will go to a lot of these events outside London, and enjoy a really, interesting experience. Hopefully, learn new things about the railway, and bring some much needed extra income to UK PLC.
Okay. Well, maybe you tell us about a few of those events
And
at the
and
end. But
and so,
just what's the fourth thing?
sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, and last but very much not least is about celebrating railway people, their pride and professionalism. We want to sort of get many more case studies of people, showcase what they do, and show the passion that's under the uniform, and not just showcase people in roles that the travelling public might see, like train drivers and people in ticket offices and the guards and so on the train, but also some of the more hidden roles. The fact that there are drone pilots, there are ecologists, there are data controllers. There's a lot of other people doing very important jobs behind the scenes that aren't on the front line, and so we want to celebrate that.
Right. Well, that's an excellent summary. And I just one of my favourite things that you didn't mention was fish and chips. I always think that fish and chips was enabled by the railway in two different ways, actually. First of all, that there were holiday trains out to, as you mentioned, to seaside resorts, and so people discovered kind of freshly cooked fish, and then of course, because of the railways, the fish could then be brought in from places like Grimsby and elsewhere, where they were Hull, where they were caught, into the towns and cities much more quickly while they were still fresh. And so therefore people had fresh fish to cook, and they'd have fish and chips. And that was thanks to the railways.
It was indeed. No, absolutely, and very remiss of me not to mention that as somebody who, as my shape will testify, enjoys fish and chips on a regular basis. But no, absolutely right. I mean, that's just another really good example of how we've introduced a staple to the British diet, for good or bad. But also when you think about going back to freight, because as I mentioned, Railway 200 is not just is about past, present, future. It's also about passenger and freight. And if people think about their Christmas, for example, a lot of that will have been delivered by freight, their turkey, their Christmas crackers, the bunting, the wine.
Yeah.
But obviously, the freight sector hasn't had the need, perhaps historically, to become in marketing terms of sort of B2C sector, because it's communicating what they do to the general public,
Yeah.
and so many people don't appreciate the products and services that they enjoy on a daily basis that's delivered to them by the freight sector, including
and
helping to
by
keep the
rail,
nation's
yes.
exactly and
Yeah.
helping to keep the nation's lights on, for example. Um, so when you think that the freight sector can one train of steel can make 1,000 new cars, or 60,000 white goods, carry enough materials to build 30 homes. There's a significant contribution, and obviously from the freight sector, and some significant ambition to
A-
grow that as the opportunities
Absolutely.
allow.
Absolutely. So tell us, have you got some big events lined up and maybe some small ones as well?
We have. I mean, we launched the anniversary year at noon on the New Year's Day with a global whistle up, which was an idea that came out of the Heritage Railway Association, which we then
Right.
expanded. And that was fantastic because it involved about 50 plus heritage railways and the mainline railway. Hornby took part, even Thomas the Tank Engine was blowing his whistle, and it spanned 5 continents. So we had
Right.
Amtrak in the US, we had railways in Sierra Leone, New Zealand, Australia,
Fantastic.
Germany, France, Holland taking part, which was a really good way of kicking off the year. Lots of people turned up on a soggy day to blow their own whistles and take part, and involved about 200 locomotives in that activation, as it were. And then the following day, the Royal Mint launched their commemorative coin set for the year of 5 coins, one of which is a rail coin that commemorates the opening of the Stockton and Darlington Railway. The rail coin itself will be available individually later in the year, but at the moment it's part of a set of 5.
And
Um,
what value is that? What
it's a £2
£2
coin.
coin? Right.
Um, and then later in the year, there's lots of events and activities. We've got about 120 now registered on our interactive map on the website under the events tab, so it's well worth having a look there. But just to pick out some of the key events, we will have an exhibition train called Inspiration that will crisscross Britain from this summer for 12 months. So it would actually go into 2026, and that's really to promote innovation and careers. It'll have 4 carriages, one of which will be focusing on railway firsts and innovation. Another will be a kind of Wonder Lab on wheels, STEM-based classroom interactive environment. Both of those carriages, the National Rail Museum are helping us to curate. And then another carriage is to focus on careers, particularly some of the more hidden roles, as I've mentioned. And the fourth will be a partner zone as a flexible exhibition space that can change to suit the locations that the train will be travelling. It'll be very eye-catching. I'm sure it'll create lots of buzz and interest, and we hope to attract at least 400,000 people,
Wow.
180,000 school children to come and visit. It'll be free to enter, but obviously there's a bit of organisation around that, and we're just
And
sort
it's
of
going to park around the
finalising the
country. It's going to
itinerary.
park up on some bay
It
platform
will.
somewhere and
Exactly.
be visited. Right.
It'll go to a mix of sort of mainline stations, heritage railways, and freight depots.
Right.
But we're just sort of finishing off the itinerary for that. Other big activations are Alstom has shown a brilliant piece of industry leadership. So they'll be opening their doors at their historic Litchurch Lane site in Derby, obviously the new home of the railways, from the 1st to the 3rd of August, with the greatest gathering, as they're calling it, which will be the largest temporary assembly of trains and rail exhibits for a generation. So they're pulling all that together. They'll be announcing more detail on that soon. And then across the community rail sector, the heritage railways, there's lots of events. Bluebell Railway have got a big festival, which they managed to secure national heritage lottery funding for. And there's a 9-month festival in the northeast of England, as you would expect, given the importance of the Stockton Darlington
Yeah.
Railway opening as the inspiration for this, which is called S&DR 200, which has been supported by the local councils and others. And that's a fantastic festival, which will start from March this year, going through to November,
Yes,
with
I'm actually giving a talk in July in Darlington, on the 11th of July in relation to that. So that
Oh,
I'm looking
fantastic.
forward to that. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got a really exciting program, and it'll be at world-class venues. There's been multi-million pounds put into a number of sites in the northeast in quite a deprived part of the country. So the hope is that all that, as well as people going along to all the festival activities and art commissions, that it'll regenerate the area for a long time to come.
So is there anything, I mean, obviously a lot of our listeners are in the rail industry themselves. I'm sure some of them have heard of this, but some of them might not have done. Um, are there things that they could do? And if they want to do things, how should they approach you?
Yes, as I say, last year was about engagement and really making the industry and the wider public aware of the anniversary, and then turning that awareness, frankly, into ownership as a partner-led campaign. So there's still plenty of time to organise events and activities, campaigns, apply our branding across online and offline materials. And we would encourage people to visit our website where there's the map that I've mentioned. There's a fantastic teacher
What is your
toolkit.
website? What's the address?
It's www.railway200.co.uk. Lots of interesting info. It's been regularly updated, but it does include a wonderful teacher and parent toolkit, which is the biggest and most comprehensive compilation of educational resource materials in the industry, which my colleague Martin Pennell has helped put together. And that helps to bring to life sort of STEM for key stages 1 to 4. So well worth a visit if people are sort of going out doing school talks and presentations. There's lots of good stuff there to engage with. But also people can download our partner toolkit, which has social media assets, our logo that can be used freely for non-commercial purposes. Follow us on social media. We're on X, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and
I
have
hope
a
you're going to enjoy Blue Sky, which is the growing one then.
well, we have been looking at Blue Sky, but obviously we're a startup campaign, so we kind of still need the industry
Right.
to follow us more on social and share our posts because it's quite interesting. If all the big players in the rail industry was to share our posts or comment on them, then at the flick of a button, at no cost whatsoever, we could get in front of 16 million followers.
Right.
So our ambition as a very low cost but big ambition campaign is to which achieve scale and significance and get some cut through nationally. And encourage the industry to sort of restore its mojo in a way after quite a difficult period of time, to
Right.
get a bit more kind of spirit and recognize its achievements and help to tell that very coherent and comprehensive narrative about the railway's sort of past, present, and future.
Okay. As a last thing, will there be some particularly big event to mark the actual date of the 200th anniversary, which I think is September, isn't it?
Is the 27th of September. There'll
Yeah.
be a lot of activity going on in the northeast, as you can imagine, particularly, and there'll be more of that during the course of the year in terms of letting you know what exactly is planned. But the Stockton Darlington Railway Festival is playing a key part in that, and the exhibition train will be up there at that time.
Okay, well, thank you, Alan. That's a wonderful run through of what's going to be exciting. Yeah, I think we'll definitely have you on again in a few months' time to kind of refresh our memories about all this and to tell us about any new events that you've had arranged and also about the successes that you'll have already had. So thank you very much for
Great.
coming on Calling All Stations.
Thank you, Christian. Very, very kind of you. Could I just, I mean, it may not have time to include this in your piece, but also just to mention we've launched a charity partnership with Alzheimer's Research UK and the 4 main rail charities, the Railway Benefit Fund, the Railway Children, Railway Mission, and the Transport Benevolent Fund. And they'll be working together collaboratively to try and raise £200,000 for their excellent causes during the anniversary year. So again, we'd encourage your listeners to go on the website and have a look at that and please donate because they do some fantastic work.
Okay.
The campaign is all under the premise of protecting rail memories for the future.
Okay, I will. I'm sure that will allow you that little puff at the end. So thank you very much, Alan.
Thanks. All the best. Take care.
Cheers.
So, Christian, a packed year of events celebrating Railway 200.
Yes, and I have a slight secret to tell you here, Mark, which is that I've never really thought that the Stockton and Darlington was the most significant railway by any means. I think that the Liverpool and Manchester, which is 5 years later, so we can celebrate that as well, was far more significant. It connected two cities. It was a entirely steam-hauled locomotive, steam by locomotive and static locomotive. It transported both cargo and people. It was double track throughout. It was a far grander enterprise linking two cities which both have Premiership teams rather than Stockton and Darlington, which don't even boast a single league club. And Stockton and Darlington was really what I think was the last of the wagonways. In other words, it was part of their heritage of the mine railways that had existed since the 17th century in the northeast, rather than being the first railway. But let's celebrate it anyway.
Absolutely. Let's have a celebration. And I think it's worth saying to our listeners that your mighty tome on the history of the railways, Fire and Steam, has been recently reissued to mark the 200th anniversary of the Stockton and Darlington Railway, with a new foreword by Lord Hendy, and is available from wherever you buy your books.
Absolutely. And it has a controversial cover on it because the cover shows a kind of Pendolino train, but it's more like in Southwest Trains livery, and that's already attracted some criticism. But as I always say, this is an artist's impression. It doesn't mean that it's actually real. It's not a photograph. But anyway, hopefully that little bit of controversy will just attract a few more sales. So, Mark, you've been looking at the new legislation relating to buses, which is maybe going to transform the bus network, particularly outside London. What's the key points in it?
Well, listeners who follow the bus industry will know what a remarkable story it's been for the last just over 40 years, since the buses in Great Britain were mostly privatised and deregulated through the 1985 Transport Act. And what we've seen in recent years, first of all under the Conservative government, and then greatly accelerated under the newly elected Labour government, has been a reform process to restore a higher degree of local control over bus services. And in fact, this is a very significant week for buses in England, because not only have we had the introduction of the bus services bill earlier this week in the House of Lords, but last Sunday, Greater Manchester, under the leadership of Mayor Andy Burnham, completed the rollout, establishment, launch of its complete B network, which is a total network of franchised services under local political control, comparable to the arrangements in London. And that's the first time we've seen something of that extent anywhere except London for, as I said, nearly 40 years. So a remarkable achievement, but a tortuous process, I think it's fair to say, to have reached that point. And that's really what this new bill, the Bus Services Bill, is designed to address, because it actually has 11 provisions, and I won't sort of go into detail on all of them, because you might all lose the will to live. But most importantly of those 11 provisions, in some ways, is it's designed to make the rollout of the Greater Manchester model easier, faster, cheaper for local authorities and local leaders to achieve than has been the case under the pre-existing legislation, because it takes a lot of effort, a lot of process, a lot of consultation, and a lot of kind of legal pitfalls to avoid in order to establish a franchised system of bus operation. It also, as well as tidying up the arrangements for those communities that decide not to have franchising, but to have something called an enhanced partnership, which is a kind of hybrid between the free market model and the regulated model. It does introduce something that was a Labour manifesto pledge, which is to make it easier for local authorities to establish their own bus companies. Because at present, even if you have a franchised model introduced locally, it's likely that your bus operators are going to still be private companies, many of them part of the big transport owning groups.
As they are in London, yes.
As indeed they are in London, and indeed they are in Greater Manchester. So although there are a handful of municipally owned local authority bus companies across Great Britain still,
Yes,
this is
Reading and
Lothian,
yeah,
Cardiff, and so on.
yeah,
This is designed to allow the establishment of those companies more easily. Now, that's still, it strikes me, Christian, that's still a pretty tall order for local authorities to
to
sort of
create a
step
bus
up and
company. Yeah,
address, given all the other pressures that they're under, and the risks that they might be required to take in setting up a business like this. But nevertheless, it's designed to make it easier for them to do that. And there are various, as I said, there's a total of 11 provisions in this bill, which go across matters such as safety and accessibility, school services, the training of bus staff even is something that gets a mention here, because of course there would be no bus services without the people that drive the buses and
right.
maintain and operate the fleets.
So
So
one of the things that it does now is, I mean, the bus companies used to not be able to coordinate their services with one another because they get into trouble with the markets authorities. Is that now that will now be possible? So if you have two bus companies in a particular town, they'll be able to talk to each other and talk to the local authorities the
this
way they
this
couldn't
was
before.
to some extent this was addressed by the earlier Conservative
Right.
legislation. The Bus Services Act of 2017 addressed some of the absurdities in the competition regulations, which, as you rightly say, meant that those companies, private companies and local authorities that tried to coordinate services
Yeah.
historically, could actually be sort of fined and prosecuted for anti-competitive behaviour. So there have been
Yeah.
steps in the past to remove those obstacles, and of course, the introduction of a lawful franchising system in effect creates a local monopoly on the bus network under democratic control, as London has continued to enjoy over the last 40 years, but is now available in other parts of the country, at
So
least
do
other
you
parts of
think that
England.
we're going to see a lot more Manchester type models emerging, or do you think it's still going to be an uphill task? Because God, it's taken a long time, and in various places there've been legal cases by the bus companies and so on. There was in Manchester, indeed, and there was another one in Newcastle that they fought tooth and nail against this. But now that the legislation favours the local authority model, do you think we're going to see lots more?
It does appear that this is something that there's a real appetite for amongst the emerging band of metro mayors
Right.
across England. Um, Probably more so from those that are of the Labour Party, of which the majority are. But there are further metro mayors being elected this May. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of bus provisions they want to make. It's also important to reflect that just before Christmas, the UK government published proposals for the further reform of local government in England, which would see a simplification of local government institutions, because there are still many parts of England where people have two councils, a district council and a county council. But also the increased use of metro mayors or comparable directly elected mayors across large geographical territories. And it seems highly likely that these mayors and other local leaders are going to want to offer improved bus services as a key part of their pledges to the electorate, and so can be expected to use these powers more extensively. So although there's a lot of talk about reform of the rail industry in Great Britain under the recently elected government, what we are seeing progressively is a transformation of the scene as far as buses are concerned.
Okay, well, lots to talk about in the future, I'm sure, as that unfolds.
Here's Christian's final thought from the Departure Lounge.
Well, this is a departure. Mick Lynch, who has led the RMT union for many years, has announced that he is leaving at the relatively young age of 63. And he's going to be a very hard act to follow. He is probably the most consummate media performer in the rail industry. I mean, he's just absolutely brilliant at it, and the way he's knocked back hostile interviews has been a joy to watch, and is an object lesson for people who are facing up against hostile interviews. Indeed, there's a lot of Labour politicians who could learn from that. And the RMT is still, of course, big news. I mean, most unions in the past 30, 40 years have really somewhat disappeared, and industrial relations, which used to kind of have lots of correspondence on national newspapers, now they're now not pretty much non-existent, because the days of many strikes have gone because of the lack of union organization, and the fact that technology has killed off much of the possibility for union activity at times. So this will be a big story, and will be followed up about who will actually succeed him, and what type of person will take over, because he's been seen as pretty left wing. Will there now be a kind of move towards the centre? Will there be somebody more Starmerite? Remember that RMT is not affiliated to the Labour Party, and because it sees itself as left of the Labour Party. So plenty to look at there, and this is going to be another really interesting thing to investigate in 2025.
Calling All Stations, the Transport Podcast with Christian Walmart, is produced by Cogitamus Limited, a leading provider of public affairs consultancy services in the sector. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please consider giving us a 5-star rating with whichever platform you use. Do follow us on social media channels, including Blue Sky, Facebook, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Our handle on X is @AllStationsPod.